Hello, and welcome back to another great episode of the Grateful Redhead podcast. I'm Angie Ringler, your host, and today I am joined by Matt Holmes, and we're going to talk a little bit about relationships and mentors. And cool enough, Matt is joining us from Costa Rica today, so he's enjoying some beautiful weather over there, I bet, aren't you?
That's right.
Unlike a lot of the United States, some of our family is up in Michigan and they are not enjoying beautiful weather at the moment. So for those that are listening, I hope you're getting some sunshine and some happiness in your day today. So today I wanted Matt to be on my show because he has a really interesting platform that he started called Handshake. Is it called handshaking.com, or did I get that right?
You got it. Handshaking.com.
Handshaking.com. So I feel like as we're moving, towards the endemic stage, which is fantastic, and we're getting out there again, that, handshaking used to be what we did all the time, right? Networking groups, meeting old friends, seeing family. Personally, I'm a hugger, so I even go beyond the handshake. But I feel like we're getting back to this need to have some, human contact, getting our conversations going again, which are not just over Zoom, more of in-person conversations. And so I want to talk to you today, Matt, about your statement I read on your website. Let me just go there so I get it right, because I like the powerful sentence. It says that you like to speak about the importance of genuine give first personal relationships. So I want us to delve into that a little bit. But first, if you'll take a few minutes and just introduce yourself and let us know kind of, where you come from and what brought you to starting handshaking.com.
Sure. So the quick story is, I've been an entrepreneur almost my whole life, from convincing my parents to buy candy in middle school so I could resell candy bars. We bought it in bulk to save on costs. I kind of went from that to buying and selling motorcycles and trucks and cars in college, went on to real estate, but eventually really wanted something online. And I didn't want investors, so I knew I couldn't afford to hire Americans. I knew I'd be outsourcing to different countries, and also am interested in different cultures. So I did have a proper adult business with my real estate company. We bought single family homes in Denver with out-of-state investors and rented room by room to increase the rental income. That was a great business, but real estate's a little bit old-fashioned. And what I mean by that, it's hard to get people to come and repair the properties. Not many people love their landlord, so I got kind of tired of being a landlord, and I didn't see so much potential. I really wanted to make a bigger splash than what I felt I could accomplish in the real estate industry. So I moved online. And it was still the same concept where you buy it low and sell high, or you develop an asset that generates income and you either rent it out or you sell that asset for someone else to make passive income from that asset. So in case that probably doesn't explain what we do at Handshaking, what we do is we develop what we call lead generation websites that provide leads for service providers. So I'll give you an example. If I'm not going into too much detail, which makes it a little bit easier to understand. We sell phone call leads, kind of like Yelp or Home Advisor. That's how we make money. And the way that we acquire these phone call leads is we build a little website in, say, the small town of Fort Collins, Colorado, and we make a website for concrete contractors. Fort Collins Concrete Contractors was the first website we built. Eventually, once you make a logo, a Facebook, Twitter page, post on it, publish a blog post once a month, people start thinking it's a place to get a concrete quote, which it is. So you call us, and then that phone call is what we sell to the concrete contractor that pays us each month for all of the phone calls. So I hope I explained that in not too much detail, and I hope it made sense.
So are the phone calls going directly to that concrete contractor? We'll use that example.
Yes, once we have a paying customer, they answer all of the phone calls.
Interesting. So what it does, it just kind of brings it down to the local level, because they know that they're contacting a local person to get their whatever it is needs.
Yep. A lot of concrete guys, we sell leads primarily in the real estate contracting space. And a lot of those guys are old fashioned. They're not playing on their websites, or they might find a 1-800 number somewhere that doesn't look home. But with our websites, you can call the numbers, you can text them. If the concrete contractor doesn't answer, my sales team will answer, and we'll take down your information and have them call you back. So yeah, that's how it works.
So I find the phone calls interesting in itself these days because most of us, we get by with texting. I know majority of the people that I communicate with prefer to just do it over text. And, there are these kind of conversations or topics that we know are not text appropriate, but people still keep doing them. So I love to hear that the phone call is alive and well. As I mentioned to you when we were first, logging on today to do our recording, and I mentioned to you that I just had a few phone calls, actual phone calls, not on Zoom, but with my phone in my hand with some people over the last few days, and they were fantastic. We went into conversations that we would not have normally gotten into. Now, I don't know if it's because we didn't have to worry about what we look like on Zoom. Is our backdrop good? Is our house a mess? All of those things that we're worried about that people will see or maybe make judgments about us. It's all removed on the phone. And I really like that we can just have this conversation and allow ourselves to listen to each other and not be bogged down with the visual of how we see each other. Even though the power of video is, you hear it all the time. When I'm, trying to learn something new about how to do marketing or, establish some new customer relations, they all talk about putting video out there, getting your video content on social, ramping up your videos on your website. And here you are saying, look, this is the power of the phone call, of letting somebody just contact you directly and picking up the phone. Do you have to explain this to, like, when you're trying to get out there and get some business? Do you have to, like, remind people of the power of the phone call, or are a lot of people really believe, like I do, that it's still there?
Yeah, that's a great question. I think with contracting, usually you have a couple of questions. If let's say you have some damage on your driveway, you need your driveway repaired. Some people might text our websites if they just want an estimate, but then the contractor kind of needs a little bit more information. If you're not close to where the contractor's based, well, how big of a job is it? What are the measurements? So can I see pictures of the damage? And I think phone calls, it can cover just enough information to find if it's a good match. And if it's a good match, let's schedule an appointment for an estimate right there. That's usually the contractor's next step in the sales process. So yeah, phone call's still good with that, and you can usually learn something from it as well. And we'd be guilty to only talk about the phone call, because you were also talking about video and also in person. You said you're a hugger, with a company called Handshake, and I can't just talk about phone calls. The goal of all of the connections that we help our contractors make is for them to get a handshake with the customer in person and do some business together. Now, of course, in the early days of Handshaking, when I was still figuring out the business model, I was much more focused on that concept, the concept of networking and shaking hands and beginning a long-term relationship with people in your industry for mentorship or advice. So we could also spend some time talking about that. But I think the phone call is not dead. It's great. It's alive and well, especially for a lot of the older folks that still own homes, where younger folks might be more inclined to Facebook message a company, not even text them. So, but phone calls are still alive and well. I agree with your point.
Well, I have in my task list this week to reach out to some new stores throughout the United States and see if they're interested in carrying our, plastic free, waste free line of household cleaners and body products, and, kind of have this standard verbiage that we send out there about what we do. And normally we would reach out and say, hey, can I get the contact information for the buyer? And let's email them some information. But in just this short conversation I've had with you, I'm actually going to have a conversation with them on the phone. I'm not even going to say, because normally I would start with that. Well, I don't want to take your time. Let me just email you. But no, I think really what I'm going to do is express to them, like, look, how can I help you? We've got this line of products. Let me send you some to try. Get behind the product, use something on your own, And then once you love it, you're going to want to offer it to your clients. So it's just another way of kind of, because I can't be there in person, here I am trying to reach stores throughout the United States. It gives me another way to touch them. I hope that doesn't sound too bad, but reach out and have another touch of that person, since we can't do that. And by the way that I can do it is say, here, try my product, wash your hair with it, wash your clothes with it, have that experience that we might be having if we were in the same room, but since we can't do that. So yeah, you've kind of inspired me today. And I think we've only been talking for like 3 minutes. So that's really cool. Maybe 5 minutes. But what I do want to tap into is what you mentioned about mentors and seeking advice of other people. You started this out in an industry that you were familiar with. You kind of went from real estate. You have a lot of experience probably hiring contractors and repair people. So this seemed like maybe a natural way to go to this area where you could see you could bring some value. Did you have to reach out and find some mentors in your niche in order to start this? What is it like to try to find the right mentor to get the right advice?
Yeah. So my short response is that every entrepreneur should have a mentor that's where they want to be 1 year in the future. And you should also have another mentor where you want to be 10 years in the future. So you need to have that person where you can almost reach some of the things that they're doing. And then that person who's really thinking about the big picture on where you want to be 10 years in the future. Now, the conversation of mentorship we can go into much more detail about that, because there's also the side, who are you mentoring? Because if you are only around people who are way more successful and further along than you, where are you getting your energy? You might just feel like you're behind. It's also important to help others who are trying to get where you're at. Even if you're a new entrepreneur, there's other people who want to be a new entrepreneur next year, So yeah,
Wow.
we can talk about whichever side of that you'd like to start with.
I'm very interested in starting on the flip side, which you totally surprised me about, is that I'm always looking to find the right mentor forward, not always looking backwards, even though I'm more than happy to. When I ever get questions, or when I get phone calls or emails from other people starting businesses or in my niche of low waste, plastic free, and they're looking for advice, I am so happy to take the time and to help them do that. But I'm not actively seeking to be a mentor. Let's start with that.
Sure. Well, I think I always like to look at the value transfer, which is also something we can look at when you start new relationships with, say, people you want to sell your products with. We can also look into that later. But yeah, for the mentorship and menteeship side of things, I don't think you need to look for mentees. The serious ones who are really going to respect your time are already going to know who you are, and they're already reaching out to you. And if they're not reaching out to you, they might reach out to you later. I think having this platform and this podcast is a great way for them to find you. Is if they're looking for stuff in the space, they'll probably find you with one of the ways you're putting content out there. And then and you also highlighted a great point. You said you're happy to help them. You're not looking for them, but you're happy to help them. And a lot of people ask me why how do I get a mentor? What's in it for them? And you said, you highlighted that right there. You said, well, I'd be happy to help them, and that's because they're in your industry, and you can save them some of the mistakes that maybe you've made along the way. You can share that, and you can see them grow from that, and that's a benefit to the mentor. Now, of course, that's not as big of a benefit as getting shortcuts and great mentorship in business. I mean, that's what we all want and need, is how do
Yeah.
I get to the top the fastest and without making too many mistakes. That's of course what we all want. So normally, with mentors, I've seen this, and I'd also like to say mentors, in my opinion, are different than coaches that you pay.
Yes, it's not the
No,
same
that's
as
okay.
coaches.
Yeah, paying for business advice is a little bit different, because if you have a mentor who's giving you business advice, there's some type of value exchange that's making them want to give you advice, and that's true advice. That's the best. That's the gold. What's there's a saying. I've been abroad for too long to remember all our
The
American
nugget of gold.
euphonics. The nugget of gold. Let's go with that. That's the nugget of gold, is when they are giving you advice without pay. Because once you start paying someone like a business coach, now their motivation's a little bit different to help you, because they need to keep you on board each month or whatever your payment agreement is, where sometimes that might not be in your true best interests. Where a mentor's, they're not going to be afraid to tell you something you don't want to hear. Where if you're paying a business coach, they might limit the bad news that they give you. And part of entrepreneurship is realizing the vast amount of bad news and things you're doing wrong and how bad things look from the outside when you're not, when you're in your business looking at it every day and you miss how silly it looks from the outside from someone who looks at it for the first time. Getting used to that bad news is part of entrepreneurship, I've found.
So, how do you find these people who are in front of us on the path that want to also would be happy to mentor? And I want to say for those that are listening, right, this does not have to be from an entrepreneurial standpoint. This can be finding people that are doing what you're doing. Maybe you want to go to graduate school or college or something, and finding somebody on that path in front of you who is doing that can also give you that advice. Or going to some sort of looking for some type of specific job, finding somebody in that industry, maybe not somebody in your own town that you would be competing with in that job, but certainly reaching out across the country to somebody who you wouldn't be head to head with and interviewing or something. But the idea is that having a mentor is very similar, I think, to like a coach, right? If you're in sports, if you play golf or you're a runner or a team sport or hockey, right? Your coach is your mentor there to kind of guide you along. So I just want to make that differentiation when you said it's different than coaching. We're talking about in this conversation, you were talking about paid business coaches. And I
Yes,
totally
great.
get to that. Like they don't want to share with you a lot of bad news because that we might feel it reflects upon their ability to get us to the next level, or that we're not advancing like we think we should for the money that we're spending on them. So, how is it that we can find a mentor that's ahead of us on the path?
Yeah. Well, I'll share my personal experience with that. So when I first started Handshaking, I didn't quite know exactly what value we were going to provide. I didn't know we were going to be all in on these lead generation websites. I just knew I wanted an online company. I don't want investors or a boss equivalent of an investor. And I also want to outsource and see what I can make happen with different cultures. And but I didn't really know. So we were doing Instagram marketing, personal branding, websites. We tried lots of different things. So the mentorship that I was looking for at that point is, can you help me find what value my business provides? Because I'm just struggling along these first few years, and I don't know what our sweet sauce, our special sauce is. What exactly is the one thing that we're experts at? And it took me 2 years or so to find that. And those 2 years, I was kind of interviewing entrepreneurs on a video series and kind of looking at this guy who had an online business, looking at this guy who raised money for a tech business, and helping. I was kind of looking for advice on what value does my business provide? How does that pair with my personal experience? Here's the funding we've got. Here's the team that we've got. I'm looking for advice. And my need for mentorship later changed. But to answer your question on how to find that mentorship, um, anyone I looked up to, billionaires or not, I would just message them and message them and message them. Emails, I think, a lot of people never wrote back, but that didn't mean that they said no. That just means they didn't respond back to my email. Maybe I had the wrong email. LinkedIn, I remember one time I messaged billionaire Jeff Hoffman, one of the entrepreneurs behind Priceline.com, and just got a response right away on LinkedIn. There's lots of people, billionaires, who are ready to help young entrepreneurs who don't even know their value yet. Jeff talked to me when I didn't even know our value. Now I'm more than 7 years into Handshaking, and I know, we build lead generation websites, and we make money by selling phone call leads to real estate contractors. And in fact, we also sell our websites. So if you want to get into the lead generation game, you can buy one that's already making $1,000 a month in net profit. It'll cost you, but you can buy one from us. So that's what we do now. It's much more of a sharper niche that we've found in business value that we provide to different people. So now I'm looking for a different type of mentor. Once I had a dozen staff members outside of the U.S. and no investors, and had a money coming in, I needed a different type of mentor. I didn't need someone who's going to help me figure out my business value or help point me in a different direction. I needed someone who knew, hey, how can I access the top SEO experts that are going to give me advice on this specific strategy where we compete in towns with, a little bit more than 100,000, but not huge towns like this and in these niches, getting very technical and specific. And the need for mentorship is what brought me to live abroad for the first time. I moved to the Philippines, and of course, with all my staff in the Philippines, I instantly met tons of other business owners outsourcing and hiring in the Philippines and living there. And this was during the pandemic. So there's a tax form. There's a tax form I needed. It took me forever to figure out, what do I need for these employees? They don't have a social security number. They're not a contractor. I can't file a 1099 if they don't have a U.S. social number. I definitely can't do a W-2 without them having a social. What do I call them? Employees? Contractors? Today, I use the word team members. But there's a tax form, and my accountants, my lawyers, my entire network that I had in Denver, people didn't know. Lawyers, accountants, they didn't know what tax form I needed. So obviously, that's why mentorship's important, is just to find the right tax form. That's why.
When all else fails, it all comes down to the IRS.
Yes. Once you're making money, you got to tighten up the bolts with the IRS. That is true.
So true.
So,
but in a way, you almost didn't know. It's a kind of conundrum that we're at sometimes, right? You want to ask good questions, but you don't know the questions to ask. So here you were. It sounds like you had a fairly good network in place already, like you said, in Denver, of those what I call your bail money, your banker, your accountant, your insurance, and your lawyer. You got to have your bail money lined up at the very start. So, but when they can't give you the answers, you kind of think, well, who am I missing now? Who do I have to ask? And more importantly, what should I be asking if my people that I'm supposed to be leaning on, if they're not able to give me those answers? So how did you when you were over in the Philippines, were you just kind of meeting people, just being out, and come to find out through conversation that they're in business, or were you being introduced strategically to people?
Yeah, let's talk a little bit about networking strategy. I like that. So I'll spend just a quick moment in Denver, because I don't want people to think that a lot of this happened naturally. A lot of this took hard work, volunteer time, ideas, events that I all came up with on my own. In Denver, I used to organize the Startup Denver meetup group. Grew it from I think 130 people to 3,000. So I was able to host events, put a ton of time and money into it, and I would pick entrepreneurs that had ideas. And then I had a good excuse to get in contact with the mentors that I wanted access to, the venture capitalists, the entrepreneurs who had sold companies. And I said, hey, why don't you come judge these? You like sharks? Okay, good. You're going to be a shark on Startup Denver's, we're not calling it Shark Tank, but you get the idea. Yeah. I'll buy you a beer. So that's kind of how I built my Denver network. And then, really just focusing. When I went all in on Handshaking, fortunately, I did have some money left over from my real estate business. So I wasn't in a hurry to make a lot of money now. I had a little bit of cushion, and I could kind of focus on relationships rather than the monthly income. So with real estate, I struggled through those first few years because the cash flow was such a big problem in real estate. But anyway, that's kind of, I want to stay focused on the networking strategy part. So that's kind of how I did it in Denver. And then in addition to the events, I also had a show like this one that people might be watching or listening to. Thank you guys for being here. But you can see the Grateful Redhead over here has a show. This does not happen for free. She's got to put time and money into it. And in exchange for that, she gets access to probably a much higher level guest than me. But it's a powerful networking tool to have a show or a podcast, or even just a blog, even just a live website with a blog. You can ask to interview people by text. I think I got Kevin Harrington to give me an interview on a blog, but I know he's one of the sharks from Shark Tank. If you haven't heard of Kevin Harrington, one of the first ones. But eventually, once I got more and more guests, it started with a buddy's fiance who sold paintings for $5,000, and then it kind of evolved into some mentors and a startup accelerator. And I remember my only goal that year was to get Brad Feld, who's probably one of the top venture capitalists in Colorado, on my show. And I got him in June or July. He joined right away. And then I realized, okay, there's a little bit of momentum behind this networking stuff. If I can be trusted to spend time with with venture capitalists, well, I should be trusted to spend time with billionaires. And sure enough, the first billionaire on the show, I just got a phone call from a friend. He said, Matt, you remember John Paul DeJoria? I was like, yeah, the billionaire, lives in LA, founder of Patron Tequila, Paul Mitchell Hair Products. Of course I remember him. Why do you ask? He said, well, he's in town in Denver and he's at the salon and he has some free time. We don't know what to do with him. Can you come interview him? I said, I'll be there in 15 minutes. That was how I got the first interview with the billionaire. So, you can see having a show, hosting events, this networking stuff doesn't happen freely. You got to be providing real life value to these people. Sure, I reached out on LinkedIn, but in the second message, I've got a link to someone that we both know that I did a video interview with. So that helps them really trust me to kind of spend some time focused on my questions and what I need to learn from them.
So it sounds like you had go ahead, finish your thought.
Well, the last thing is, as my show progressed, I realized it wasn't, at first I was worried about how I looked on the show, and then I was worried about the guest, and then I was worried about the people watching. And then I kind of, after several episodes, I felt like I was really able to perfect a nice balance of finding what people want to hear and also collecting a couple very niche questions that will help me with my specific business. That's the last thing I wanted to add, is that takes time to kind of hone that skill.
Yeah. And that last thing you said about, finding those answers for yourself, right, through the questions, kind of ties back to what I was going to say, is that it sounds like you had a pretty clear, maybe not totally thought out, but a pretty clear understanding of this path that you wanted to take, right? And that in itself takes some planning. We can't just be like, hey, I want to be an astronaut. Okay. What does that involve, right? I mean, really kind of deconstructing or working that backwards. Okay, if I want to land on Mars, what are all the things that's required to do that? And that in itself takes some thought process and putting your time. But I feel it's always putting my brain thoughts down onto paper. I'm very much a write everything down. I still love pencil and paper, and I feel like if my thoughts are just up here, that's not a very safe place for them to just be lingering all the time. So I like that you, I feel kind of maybe went in the back door a little bit, and not in a bad way at all, but you were like, okay, how can I get to these people that would be of this larger scale, that would also be able to actually encompass helping more people along the way? You weren't just saying to these mentors, right, hey, I need your help, I've got these problems. You were like bringing them into a situation that could benefit a lot of people. And I think that's a very admirable trait that you had to do that. That's really very cool.
I mean, thanks for calling it a trait, but really it's just up to, early stage entrepreneurs putting in the work. There's a big difference. If you ask someone, hey, can I pick your brain over some coffee? A lot of entrepreneurs ask that. That's a common question. Once you get to the people that really have the knowledge, there's a lot more competition. That's not going to cut it. Because when you say, can I pick your brain for coffee? It's a selfish ask. You want to gain knowledge from them, and that's it. You might offer to buy their coffee. These people are doing sales way higher than we are. They don't care about a coffee. They care about their time. And but if you ask someone, hey, I'd like to interview you about your success and share it with everyone I know, it doesn't matter if your podcast has 0 subscribers. That is a different question, because you're saying, you know what, I'm selfless. I want to learn from you. And in exchange, I'm going to do my best to share your message with everyone I know. It doesn't matter if you have 2 YouTube subscribers. It's just about the mindset that you're willing to share what you learn from them. I just kind of wanted to add that to touch on what you said about.
That's perfect. I mean, honestly, that is really good tips right there, is to let people, yes, get the information, but more importantly, get it out there to the masses. That's really what it goes back to this conversation and handshakes and, connecting. None of us can be successful just on our own. There's just no way. We are meant to help each other. We are meant to get places with other people. And the only way to do it is through some genuine connections. So it's been such an interesting conversation with you today. And I've jotted a few things down, which I love. I love when I could do a podcast and I end up writing a few things down. So do you have any special events or anything that's going on right now? Are you still doing these I know you started the Denver startup. Are you still kind of doing those kind of group activities?
We've partnered with another similar event company called Colorado Startups, and they've grown much more cryptocurrency and Web3 friendly over the years. So now we support their events, especially with my abroad travels. Sometimes we'll do some events when I come to town, but we've basically partnered with them. It's the same type of value for entrepreneurs. And yeah, you can join the group. It's not as active as it used to be, but you can definitely find events in Colorado and Denver if you're going to be in town. It's just meetup.com/startup Denver, and that's where we live online. But
Awesome.
but yeah, if anyone else is traveling too, I'd love to meet up with any of your listeners who vibed with this conversation about networking and travel abroad. I'm abroad all over right now. Central America, last month South America, last year Asia.
Wow. It's so great to get outside of our own culture and immerse into others and really live, side by side with other people like that. I'm hoping to get to Sicily this year in October and go to my ancestral town and actually meet
Cool.
with some probably, distant cousins and things, but, to kind of live in that space, immerse, not just get on a tour bus and, go around and see it from that perspective. So, well, Matt, it's been a real pleasure having you on the show today. Let people know where they can find you if they'd like to talk to you a little bit more about what we spoke about.
Yeah, well, great. Thank you to the listeners. If you made it this far, I really appreciate the gesture. I kind of tend to worry I'm boring, but if you're still here, thanks so much. I'd love to connect with you guys. You can find me online by just Googling Matt Handshaking Holmes. Yes, I'm the one who broke the world record for the longest handshake. But also online, my handle is just handshaking without the G. So you can find me there. Just find me on Facebook, Matt Handshaking Holmes, or Twitter. It's just at Handshaking with no G.
Handshaking, no G. Okay, so obviously I can't just say goodbye until I ask, how long is the world record of handshake?
Oh gosh, I think I lost track. When we started shaking hands, it was me and one other person. It's the longest handshake between two people. My partner, Juan Diaz de Leon, we started shaking hands Friday at 11 a.m., I think about 6 years ago, 6 or 7. And the girl I was dating at the time had a meeting for work. She flew from Denver to California, and we were still shaking hands. And she finished her meeting. That Friday night, friends came by. We had a random beer sponsor that showed up, and then everyone went to bed on Friday night. We kept shaking hands. Saturday morning, we have lunch with our other hands. Saturday night, the girl I was dating flew back from California, and we were still shaking hands. It was a long weekend. It was 46 hours, a 46-hour long handshake, which now everyone always wants to ask. I'll save you the trouble from asking the question because I know what you all are thinking. How did you use the bathroom?
Oh, that didn't even cross my mind.
Oh, well, you are the first, thank goodness. But fortunately, Guinness, it's not a dirty situation. Guinness allows 5-minute breaks for every hour of handshaking. So if you shake hands for 3 hours, you're not allowed to sleep, but you can stop shaking hands for a 15-minute break if you shook hands for 3 hours straight, for example. So it's a really easy world record. You can take breaks.
Yeah. That's hysterical. So the question that came to my mind, which I wanted to ask you was, were you shaking or can you just hold the person's hand? Or do you have to literally do a handshake movement?
Yep, it was handshake and not hand holding. The world's longest hand holding record at the time was 93 days.
What?
We're talking Q1 and a few days. Apparently, people held hands for that long. That's insane.
That is crazy. So are you still friends with this guy?
Actually, he was my most recent friend to visit here in Costa Rica. And because we're both working remote now, he came here and we went out into the jungle and did some zip lining and visited an undiscovered beach way outside of the city. And then he just left yesterday. So yeah, we're still friends. Absolutely.
Man, if that's not the perfect example of how powerful a handshake can be for long-term friendships, I don't know what is. Well, Matt, thank you again for making time to join me on the Grateful Redhead podcast. And for those who are listening, if you know somebody cool like Matt who's doing some unique things out there in the world, please put me in contact with them. I would love to get a chance to have them on my show as well. So until we meet again, please be kind to one another and love each other. Peace out.